I'm
But
sorry.
now I can hardly hear you now.
Me? Okay. Let me just crank up. Can you hear us now? Cuz I'm pretty loud.
I Yeah, I've got my volume all the way up. Let me go back in the other. I think I did better in the other one.
What's that, Kenny?
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to time. How's that? Can you hear me?
Y- oh, are we live? Oh, hi everyone.
Anybody there?
Okay, we are live. But sorry we're having trouble playing this video. Interesting. No, I have myself on Facebook. And um okay, there we are. Hi everyone and welcome to the Lizzie Borden Tea and Murder podcast. Sorry about that. We always have technical difficulties it seems, but hopefully we have it straightened out. I'm excited to say this is our sixth broadcast, which is pretty exciting. It's always nice to find things to talk about in this case. Um, I like to welcome Keith back to our show. He's going to help us today sort out some myths. And Shelly, of course, always love to have you on and as the co-host. Like we have fun and we talk for hours about this case. And you're very knowledgeable, and I'm so thankful that we can do this together. And I'm so glad you're doing good. We were a little bit worried about you there, but you seem like you're wearing your vampire scarf. It's beautiful. And
Don't want to frighten the viewers.
it's like, okay, and I'd also like to thank a few people that always tune in: Rusty Judd, Judy, David, Sue, Pamela. We have, people that tune in. Hey, Holly, um, all the time. Randy, welcome. And we're just really happy to have you, and that's what keeps us going.
Yeah,
So,
Judy lives in Fall River, not too far from Maplecroft.
have you
So
guys met?
we never have, but we talk
Oh,
constantly. One of these days, Judy, we're going to get together. We have a lot to talk about.
yeah, that would be fun. We can all just like meet in meet at the house or something.
Be fun. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, it
all.
would be good. Yeah. So we're going to get right into it. We've had actually a few questions that were brought up to us to like set the record straight as best we can. And we're going to start out with the first one that came from Rusty Judd. And he just wants to clear up the weather issue. And before, we clear up the weather issue, I just want you to know that there were two reports of the, well, there was probably a lot more, but the two we're going to focus in on of that morning. And Kenny, you can bring up that slide. And basically, this is from, this is my source from Past and Present, the Rebella book, and it was reported the weather report for Thursday, August 4th, according to the U.S. Signal Service at 7 a.m. was 67 degrees, makes sense. And then at 2 p.m., it was 83 degrees. And then he goes on with the nighttime. But the Herald office temperature, I guess that's the paper,
Yes.
said that at 8 a.m. it was 66 degrees, and at noon it was 72, and at 2 p.m. 76. So it's a bit of a difference there in temperature, right? But those are the two sources of the temperatures that day. But Keith, I know you brought up the fact that if anyone was in the barn, it was going to be hot anyway.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, just think about going into an attic. I always think of crawling up to mom's attic at any time in the summer, and I wasn't wearing a big wool dress or a cotton dress or a Bengaline silk dress with a
Yeah,
Or a
petticoat.
corset. Yes.
Yeah, or and
right.
a corset. Yeah, yeah. No, it just gets so it's immediately hot. I mean, I remember opening the hatch and feeling that heat immediately.
Well,
So thinking of a
it
lot.
can be here in New England. I've lived here 48 years. You can have a moderate temperature, like 70 or 75, as it was on that morning, but you can have really high humidity. And
Yeah.
that might have been the situation. Plus, in the city, with the factories spewing all kinds of smoke into the air and the asphalt and in the brick buildings absorbing the heat. It's this is why they had a summer home in Swansea, because in the summer usually the husband stayed in town to run the business and the girls of the family and the wife went off to uh, to a summer place on the water where there was a nice breeze. So it might have only been 74, 75 the time Andrew was murdered, around 11, but the air quality and the humidity might have been very oppressive, and they
Yeah.
had previously in the week had some very warm weather, sticky weather.
Yeah. So it was hot, but not maybe as hot as we thought. And it did progress throughout the day. And speaking of Swansea Farm, John Faya has been posting some amazing photos in our group. And
Mm.
one of them was the Swansea Farm, which he took some beautiful photos of. So I just want to say thank you for that and keep posting these photos. They're great. So it gives us an
They look
idea
awesome.
what things look like. Yeah, it's really cool. Um, so our next, and by the way, if anyone has any thing that you would like us to talk about and clear up, please, please feel free. So the next thing I want to clear up is Bob Anbinder wrote and said, "Is it true that the defense attorney's file remains in the firm's possession and no one has published details on it yet?" And Kenny, that is slide 6. I took the liberty of looking this up too. So Robinson has files in his office still, and basically the New York Times printed this June 26, 1998, how the United States Supreme Court ruled that attorney-client privilege, which protects confidentiality between lawyers and their clients, continues after the client dies. And that's one of the reasons we don't see those files, which I think is totally ridiculous because, come on, this is the 1800s. It's like, but then again, if they were revealed and say there was a smoking gun, we wouldn't have fun trying to solve this case, right?
Well, we've got the Jennings journals. We recently got his notes. We've had Knowlton's for a few years now, and it's maddening not to have Robinson's. And some of us have threatened to put our ninja night suits and break in Springfield. It's still a law office there. Uh, and break in the dead of night. I understand they're locked up in a safe, in a vault,
Mm.
and you gotta believe that some people in that law firm have probably had a look at them. I know I would if I worked there. It's
You'd want to sneak a peek, right?
oh, to see. I'm
I don't
thinking
think I could without saying anything, though.
uh,
I'd have to, yeah.
I have to wonder though, if there's nothing there to see, why haven't they been published? If there's like the Jennings journals, we learned some new things. And we'll talk a little bit about the Prince Albert frock coat
Mm,
we learned about. Yes. Oh, thanks for
nice.
it's a great cover. Um, but there was really no smoking gun, and no harm was done by publishing that. And I've got to wonder, what is it in the Robinson notes and papers? Why have we not seen them this many years after the crime? I have to,
Mm.
well,
Do you think they want to not show it though because of the tourist attraction, that like the city makes too much money off of tourists and they just said, well, let's just keep people guessing
it's
because
not,
they I don't
well,
It'd
Springfield
be a
is,
heck.
yeah, it's not exactly Disneyland. People aren't running up to Springfield because the Robinson law office and papers are there.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know why they're sitting on it. I really don't know, unless there's something to see that they don't really want you to see.
Well, there's papers where the notes that he kept for his personal notes, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
Robinson, before he agreed to take Lizzie's case, after talking to Andrew Jennings, he actually went to the Taunton jail and interviewed her for 3 hours. Now, those
Mm.
are the notes I want to see. Those
That's
are the,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. He was a very careful man. I've learned a lot about Robinson over the past year. And so he wasn't going to buy a pig in the poke, even if there was a big fee attached. He wanted to check it out to see, what kind of person he was dealing with. And of course, she never
Well,
takes a hand. And
I
I think that
I
was Robinson's decision too.
I find it so fascinating, and they always say Freudian slip. Be careful what you say because it's probably true. When Lizzie was in jail, that one sentence that she said about, "Oh, they're going to take me to the Taunton is
Take down the,
asylum," which was
yeah,
right beside the jail.
it's a
So
block.
it it
Yeah.
makes
So,
you wonder if it's possible that they looked her over. I mean,
oh, of
like,
course.
yeah,
Yeah, and the Moulton Bouchelder investigation to evaluate whether Lizzie was sane.
yeah.
Uh, they talked to people who had known her, and it was deemed that she was competent. So sure, they did look her over, absolutely, and so did Robinson.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, and the other thing that was said by Andrew Borden, which still kind of makes me think, there was something like they keep mentioning peculiar, peculiar. When the the day before the murders, I think Andrew requested that Emma, let me know where you're at all times, just in case I want to get in touch with you.
Mhm.
What was
Mm.
that all about? Like, I find that interesting, you know.
I don't know. I've been sort of thinking that off as just something you say a lot of times. I don't know.
Do you?
I don't know if that's
Well, my
in a
parents
way.
did,
Yeah.
but of course, Emma was
Yeah.
41. When I was a teenager, I had to check in every 10 minutes, like, so
Yeah.
I don't attach a lot of importance to that, really. I think it's
Yeah.
a throwaway. Uh, I find it interesting that the girls did have this is a myth we can bust uh,
Oh,
that
please do, Shelley.
well, they're controlled, they're controlled by the parents. And actually, Emma and Lizzie, for two unmarried, unchaperoned, and unescorted women, really went wherever they wanted, whenever they felt like it.
Mm.
And when they
Yeah.
went to Europe, when Lizzie went to Europe in 1890 with Carrie and Anna Borden, a chaperone did go with them. But I think that's because of Ellen Shove and Anna and Carrie were more high society girls. And, they would certainly want to have the chaperone. I don't think Andrew cared whether Lizzie had a chaperone or not. And they pretty much stayed. So when he asked Emma, this proves the point that Emma and Lizzie didn't tell their father or ask, gee, Pop, we'd like to go away for maybe a couple of weeks. We're going to go see Mrs. Poole and Helen Brownell. And they made their plans, they packed their bag. And on the way out, Andrew, where can I find you if I need to get in touch with you? So that tells me that they never had to ask his permission. Of course, Lizzie's 32 and Emma's 40, 41 at the time. But they moved very freely about and had a life outside of the home.
Hmm.
Would Andrew have even wanted to pay for a chaperone and the extra lodging and the the cost of you know?
Well, well,
I believe the father was responsible for those costs, wasn't he?
uh, for overseas trips, probably in that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, they came and went very freely. Lizzie had her church functions and We don't know what Emma did for fun. I hope she had some fun, but she seemed to travel whenever she felt like it
Hmm.
and went wherever she wanted to go. So they weren't prisoners. I mean, that's a big myth that Andrew had them under his thumb and they didn't have any money of their own. And none of that is true. They got an allowance from him, as did Abby. I think it was $4 a week. And Abby complained because she had to buy household things with her
Mhm.
allowance. I remember she had bought some lace curtains for the parlor, but Emma and Lizzie, that was mad money. That was their pin money. It doesn't sound like much now, but actually that was quite a bit of money in the time.
Yeah, and speaking of Andrew, Kenny, you can bring up. Um, oh, I don't have it. Um, so there was a thing in the Elizabeth Montgomery movie that portrayed Andrew as this horrible, like, mortician that he would embalm people
In the basement.
in the basement, in the scary basement. But the truth is, that I'll read it to you. It's not an accurate reflection of the practices of the time. Undertakers used ice to slow down decomposition, and embalmment was new and did not show up, and this is very important, in Fall River until 1884. So that just blows that right out of the water because Andrew never did any such thing like that. Um, but other than that, the movie was pretty accurate. The Elizabeth Montgomery movie, there were
Uh,
some things in there that were pretty spot on, but
it's
not
the
that.
it's definitely the best of everything that we've ever had done on film.
Right.
The
Okay.
things that have come after have been off the charts bad.
Um,
V movies and that last awful thing.
I don't
Um,
even know the name of the last awful
I
thing,
don't know
but
if
it
I'm
was
still with
awful.
you or not.
The Chloe, was it Sevigny? Was that her name?
Yes.
Was that her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you think of that movie?
I didn't watch it all. I couldn't. I
You couldn't get through it, right? Yeah.
No, no. I've seen most of the Christina Ricci one because, of course, it was shot here.
Hmm.
And
Oh, yeah, she did two things. She did the Lizzie Borden Chronicles, and then she did the movie.
Chronicles.
The movie was pretty
Yeah, yeah.
good, but
Sorry.
the Chronicles were hilarious.
Mhm. Yeah.
She was killing somebody every day, like
Oh,
somebody
Well,
yeah,
different.
yeah.
there'd be no one left in Fall River to kill. Looks like everyone enjoyed the Elizabeth Montgomery movie.
Okay,
Uh,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because she really didn't amp it up. She took it seriously. They use actual inquest testimony. She played it, straight down the line. Plus, she's a great actress. What I objected to was the horrible portrayal of Abby and Andrew. Helen Crane played the part of Abby
Mm-hmm.
Borden and did more damage to that poor woman than any single thing I could name. You almost hate Abby Borden.
Yeah.
Slurped her soup, and she was just nasty, nasty woman. And Andrew had that overtone of an incestuous, in one eye, and that kind of
Right.
makes me warm. So there was some stuff wrong for sure. Uh, but compared to some of the other stuff we've seen, other treatments of this story, I still think the 1975 Elizabeth Montgomery is the best thing. I'm waiting for something even better. And there was a time when Tom Hanks had an interest in Playtone, his company.
Mhm.
But then the Chloe Sevigny thing came out. He was going to do, I think, a 4-part miniseries. And this story needs time. You can't put this into 2 hours.
Oh
And
no, no, you can't.
good
No
job. Because
way.
of it is, you need the background. And they seem to just go right for the murder sequence and a lot of blood and gore. And you need the psychological background on these people. to get you
Yeah,
fully.
we were talking about that and saying that it would be nice to open up with, you said it, Shelley, at with Emma at her mother's deathbed.
This is
You
where it
know,
all ends, I
yeah.
believe.
So we
Yeah.
have a question from James Cole. Thank you, James. He was wondering if you think it was possible Emma could have committed the murders and was the female heard by Bridget laughing when Andrew came home. I guess he's asking, well, there's a question. What
Mm-hmm.
are you asking if it was Bridget
Possible.
laughing?
No,
Well,
Emma.
Emma, was it Emma at the
Oh,
top of
Emma. I'm sorry.
the,
Yeah, Emma.
and the answer, jump in if you disagree. I'd say absolutely not. No,
It's I
no.
mean, possible with a not capital P, um, but not. I mean, yeah. I other than maybe being a indirect influence on Lizzie, or a direct influence, sorry, on Lizzie's actions. Emma has nothing to do with this. I think she was gone. You know,
Well, she's
she was
got
in
an
the town.
alibi, and what a lot of
Yeah,
the writers, they didn't understand what roads were there in 1892, because now you jump in your car and you can be Green Street to Fall River in about 18 minutes or so, but you couldn't have done that at that point in time. And we follow Emma through the day with testimony from Helen Brownell and her mother. We know when she got the carriage to go down to the train station to come back, and we know Andrew Jennings picks her up there at the train station in
Right.
Bowen. And
Hmm.
so she could not have been laughing at the top of the stairs at a quarter of 11, and then gotten back to Fairhaven to get the telegram from Dr. Bowen saying,
Yeah.
something and come home
And
around time. I mean, no.
Emma's she was with people too, so that could,
And
verify her.
and she was on the train.
Yeah.
So maybe if she
and
been
ultimate and like and Bridget didn't see her. Um,
correct.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
know, that it just I mean, and it's funny you mentioned it, Shelley, because only 3 days ago I was talking to somebody who said it's a 22-minute drive, and I
That's
said,
driving
yeah,
fast with no traffic. And of course, they didn't have
with
cars.
current roads, yeah,
And the train doesn't go directly. Yeah. So,
Unless you're a cowboy getting on a horse and galloping, you still wouldn't make it.
no,
You still
no,
wouldn't make it in time.
and I think and we've gone through it, and I'm certainly a neophyte compared to so many, but to me, I mean, did Emma's hatred of Abby, of influence Lizzie? Probably, but she wasn't there at the time. Emma was very far away.
Yeah, and that's something that's very important too. I always felt like Abby tried her best to be a stepmother to those girls growing up, and the catalyst was, I think, the selling of the house, or the giving the house that Andrew gave to Abby's sister, right? And I think that was kind of the catalyst that set off the um the turmoil in the household, right? Because the girls were mad about it,
oh,
but
yeah.
but
Didn't help.
I don't think Abby was ever wanted to be mean to them. I think it's the other way around, that they were mean to her, because in one part, and we were talking about this, that Abby begged Bridget. I don't know if it's begged. We'll never know, but she gave her extra money to stay in the house and to continue being a maid after Bridget had tried on 3 separate occasions to leave. And that's documented in a interview with was it McHenry, a news reporter who was it McHenry's wife that was a news reporter that interviewed Bridget. It was an interview with Bridget that was mentioned, that Bridget tried to leave in 3 different occasions.
Well, yeah, that tells you that, things weren't quite as rosy as Bridget Bridget really didn't spill the beans on her employers. She probably could have said, there was tension in the house. The girls didn't get along with the stepmother. She kept mum, but that's what a servant would have done at that time period. You don't air the dirty linen of your employer, uh, especially if you're going to be looking for a new job pretty soon. So, she kept pretty quiet about the atmosphere. I would love
Yeah.
to have gotten her alone and questioned her over a couple of whiskeys and gotten the real dope on what that place.
I mean, maybe,
It's funny.
Bridget was
I've
like
always
kind of.
wondered.
Go ahead, Keith. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I've always wondered. Bridget seemed pretty steadfast. I think it would have taken quite a bit of whiskey to get her to open up. I think yeah, she was. I was. It's funny. It was just a thing I was going through my head the other day. I was thinking like, I think you could have got a confession out of Lizzie before you got a anything like there was strife or they weren't very nice to me. I think Lizzie would have opened up on her sin before Bridget opened up on what she saw.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Bridget was kind of there as a buffer. Abby wanted her as a buffer, maybe between the girls and her, because I always felt like Abby was kind of afraid.
Oh,
No,
she
am I
may,
Lonely
wrong?
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think she wanted a friend in the house. I don't even know if
yeah,
it was as much buffer as just company.
Well,
yeah.
I don't
Um,
think it was any accident that after Andrew married Abby, um, Emma is sent off to Wheaton Female Seminary
Hmm.
really
yeah,
quickly afterwards because she was, well, let's see, Lizzie was 5 when her
Four-
mother died.
14 wasn't she, Shelley?
She was well into puberty for sure,
Yeah.
and she knew her mother, remembered her mother, and going through all of what young teenage girls go through. I think she behaved probably badly to the point where Andrew wanted to give Abby a chance with little Lizzie, to kind of grow into her role as surrogate mom here, uh, but couldn't really succeed with Emma kicking up, a fuss. And so she wafts off to Wheaton, and probably Wheaton because the Reverend Eli Thurston was on the board there, and Eli Thurston was the big cheese at the church, and probably there were connections there, and that's how they knew about Wheaton Female Seminary. I
Hmm.
went there, and I looked at uh, the grades and some of her teachers. All of that information is there, by the way. I went
Hmm.
with Dr. Corey
How'd
and
she do? Was she a good student?
average,
Okay,
average.
all right.
And I've lost you again.
So, Ellie, just a little bit of information. You said, do we know the timing of when Bridget tried to previously leave? I'm not sure. Maybe Shelly might know, but I'm gonna write this down. I will send you the interview though that Bridget did with this news reporter about her leaving. Wanting to leave.
Was
That's the
was
only
not one
reference.
of them
I'm
was not one of the previous spring, wasn't it? Was one of the times.
um possibly. I'm not sure, Keith.
I think so. I don't know that we know the exact time, but
I'm gonna write
I,
this down and see if we can find it.
yeah, Bridget was looking maybe for a better offer, and I know her salary was increased. And when you think of it, Bridget did not have such a hard time of it. She had to do the laundry and help with the food. Um, she had to sweep the front hall in the morning. That's why there was a carpet sweeper in that front hall closet. But Abby did a lot of the food shopping and
Mm-hmm.
cooking, and the whole second floor was taken care of by the family. And Abby, on the morning of the murder, is dusting the dining room, the front hall.
Yeah.
So compared to a lot of families that had just one servant, Bridget's duties weren't real arduous compared to
Right.
some, and she got a good salary for what she did.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a bad situation, which makes me wonder that there might be something behind the fact there was a lot of friction in the house. And,
Yeah, so John Cole, after we had that discussion about Emma, he said, "Thank you for your thoughts." He said, "Most people I talk to feel Uncle John committed the murders, but can't see how he could have murdered Andrew and why." Again, he had a pretty solid alibi. I mean, some people question it because of his peculiar way that when he walked in the backyard, before he went in the house, but he had a pretty solid alibi. Thoughts? Anyone?
oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like,
son does get a bad rap, and I feel sorry for him. Lot of people didn't like the fact that he showed up without clothing or a toothbrush. It's like, oh, how convenient. He just happened.
mhm,
But he didn't know he was going to be invited to spend the night. Andrew had some errands for him to do. And by the time he got back on that Wednesday night, it was late. And he'd had dinner over in Swansea, had done the errands and performed the commissions he was supposed to, both for himself and for Andrew. And Abby asked, why don't you stay and then go back to Dartmouth in the morning? This is why he doesn't arrive, with a toothbrush and a change of clothing. That does not make him a killer. How many times have you gotten stuck somewhere late and ended up crashing on the sofa? Uh, you know, so that's a myth. The fact that he knew he was going to spend the night before there and plotted and schemed and no, he didn't know he was going to be spending the night, and he also didn't know he was going to be invited back for lunch on the day of the murder. When he leaves around 9:15, he goes to the post office. Then he walks, up Pleasant Street to Waybosset and to stay and visit with the Emerys. He sees Bowen arrive because it was like two families, and on the way back, he decides he's going to have lunch at the Borden house after all, and he takes a streetcar back so he's not late. One thing the Bordens did, they kept specific times for their meals. So not to be late, he catches the streetcar and notices there's a bunch of priests in the back of the, and people attach a lot to that too. I don't. If I was sitting with nothing to do but look around while I'm riding down the street and I see 4 or 5 priests in a group, in those days when they went out, they wore these long cassocks and
mm,
a dog collar. Nowadays, a priest might wear jeans and you don't even know he's a priest, but
mhm.
not in 92. And I would remember if anyone asked me, oh, yeah, they're a bunch of priests, together on the trolley car. And that does not make him, a killer because he happened to notice. And then
Yeah.
there are people who are just plain observant. And he might have been. So he gets there and he sees maybe there are people in the yard and he's not sure what's going on. And maybe he goes in the backyard, picks up a pear, and is trying to figure out what's going on here and maybe looking for something he can add. Uh, doesn't make you a killer either. He
Wasn't
finally,
there a wasn't there a comment he made though when he went in and it was some comment he said, "Lizzie, what did you do?" or something he said, right? He went right for her.
I'm not familiar with her saying, him saying, "What did you do?"
It was something to that effect. I can't remember the exact words, but I read it in some. Okay, here's another thing I'm going to write down next podcast. We'll clarify it, but it things come up like this. See how complex this case is. You read something, you're like, oh, and then you go digging for the source. I think it was in somebody commented in the trial some trial transcript, but I'm going to write it down, Shelley. I'm going to look for it.
we'll pin it down. The thing with newspapers, when you do your research,
Oh,
and
thank you, James. James. I'm sorry, Shelley. Yeah. He asked Lizzie, how did this happen?
how did this happen? Okay.
Yes, but
Yeah.
still, that's like, why would he go right to Lizzie and say, how did this happen? He must have knew that maybe, like,
Well,
she,
Emma wasn't there.
Oh,
right.
He wouldn't ask Bridget, probably. Uh, I would have done the same thing. She was the only family member sitting there. I would say, "How did this happen?" You know, yeah, that I find that perfectly normal. I don't attach,
and
anything odd to that.
I
one
read
bit
into
about
things too much, apparently.
that's
But
all
go
right.
ahead.
That's what we're for.
Yeah.
um, like one thing about John Morris too is there's a lot of noise made about no toothbrush and no suit or one suit. It's 1892. Some people only had one suit.
Right. That's
Um,
true. It's very
and
true.
and you think with John Morris, his living where he did, doing what he did, you know, lack of a better term, I've always said taming the Wild West. Hygiene, not quite. You know,
Not
there's
quite
not a
so.
shower on every street corner.
Well, I think maybe
Um,
everybody was stinky back then. I don't know. It's
I
like,
imagine, yeah.
Well, when you read
Well,
Victoria Lincoln's book, Lizzie Borden by Daylight, A Private Disgrace, Victoria Lincoln, it's like smell-o-vision. She really gives you the smells, the sights, the sounds,
yeah.
where you smell the manure in
Yeah.
the gut, and that's what I love about her writing. I don't agree with her theory that Lizzie had temporal lobe
Oh,
epilepsy.
right. Yeah. Epilepsy, right. Yeah.
It really paints the scene for you
But I
of
mean, the
fall.
factories and the soot and it was kind of a very dirty kind of way to live. Like, there was no,
well, wasn't that's why people were married in June, wasn't it? Because they could smell cover up their own stink with a bunch of freshly thrown flowers. That's what I'd always heard, anyway. That
that's a great hypothesis.
that's what I'd always heard. That the flowers part of wedding was to cover up
Really? Okay.
being human.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why they would use things like lilies, flowers
Yeah,
that very strong smell,
Hmm.
especially at summer funerals, because
yeah.
embalming really comes out of the Civil War. And it was mostly formaldehyde and very strong chemicals because bodies had to be shipped from the battlefield back
Hmm.
home. And
Yeah.
sometimes it took a long time.
Right.
And I can't remember the doctor of who actually, I think his name was Holmes. I'll have to check that and post it later. Figured out, a combination of things. A lot of it was formaldehyde that could preserve the body long enough. But you're right, it didn't really become common usage as funeral parlors were not common until
Yeah.
transportation improved and a lot of people wanted to come to the viewing. They needed bigger parlors, and this is when you have the whole funeral home industry opening up, after the railway improved. And but usually, even when I was a kid, and I'm a fossil, but I'm not that old, I remember going to funerals in homes, private homes. I grew up out in the country, and the undertaker would come prepare the body at the house. And if you were buried quickly, you weren't embalmed. If it was a 3-day thing, just as they did in 1890s, they had to put you on a cooling board to
Hmm.
prepare. Sometimes they had drawers that opened up underneath. They would pack with ice, like a little thing that went underneath the board.
Yeah.
Uh, but most of the position is in the torso, not
And
in the.
you wouldn't leave the corpse alone overnight. So at least this is what my as I understood it here. So you would get an uncle or a neighbor who liked a bit of drink, and
Sure,
you'd give
that
him a couple of bottles, and he would sit there with the corpse all night.
and wake the corpse. That's
That's
right.
how it was done.
Really?
That's,
Okay.
that's
That's
Eastern
something new I
Canada. Now,
learned.
of course, the Irish up here. Yeah, the Irish up here would take the poor fella out of the box and stand him in the corner and put his favorite hat on him and give him a drink, and yeah,
So
yeah.
it was
So yeah,
unorthodox.
Irish
What?
wakes are
So was it like um by them doing like a partial kind of autopsy, and it wasn't in the dining room, it was in the sitting room, I believe. I think
Well,
that's a mix up too.
no, Abby's was
dining room.
done in the dining room.
Uh-huh.
Andrew, you can see in
Was
the
done in the sitting room.
correct. You can see the
Right.
black sofa, and you can see it's like a caning. And if you go to
Mhm.
Second Street, I found one on eBay, which Leanne did purchase, and since then they've gotten another one. So
Mhm.
now cooling boards, and they were either wooden with lots of holes punched in for obvious reasons, or they were cane because they wanted as much circulation around the body. And
It was
well,
gruesome what they did actually. And I mean, I feel sorry for Bridget because she witnessed a lot of that. Like the jars in the kitchen with
oh,
their stomachs, and I mean, could you imagine?
people,
The poor
they
girl.
were accustomed to it. You know,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Victorians live with death constantly. So what we find horrifying, because we are a culture of death deniers, this the way we live now, everyone gets a nip and a tuck and Botox, and we're never going to die. But just doing research on backgrounds of people recently, I found out how many Dr. Bowen had lost siblings.
Mhm.
It was You might have 8 or 9 siblings, and maybe 3 of them had died in infancy. One dies of, they live with death. And when we watch the Elizabeth Montgomery movie, we're horrified when Lizzie comes downstairs in the night and kisses her father in the dining room.
Mhm.
On,
Yeah,
and just
Yeah, that's crazy.
how did they even sleep with the two bodies in the
Right.
dining room? We
Right.
could, but that was not unusual then for the
Hmm.
time period. So it's a whole different. There's a wonderful book called The Victorian Celebration of Death, and it really is great reading. It gives you a better insight in.
Bedtime reading.
Well, it's always been a fascination of mine,
Yeah. Yeah.
and cemeteries, as you know. Uh, so
So I have another question comment from James. Thank you. Do you find it odd Lizzie never left the house that morning after finding her father murdered? How did
yeah,
she know that the murderer wasn't still in the house? It's a great question. Uh,
very good question.
Thank you, James.
Well, would you? What do you think, Keith?
I wouldn't stay in the house. No way. I would be screaming and leaving like for the
Honey, I would have flown out that front door and
yeah.
screamed murder in the middle of Second Street. And
Yeah.
then the only person who's still alive is Bridget. And what does she do? She sends her out. And so now Lizzie's alone. I mean, the killer could have been in the basement,
yeah,
could have been upstairs. That common sense tells you, boy, that was odd behavior. Not too.
Definitely odd for
yeah.
back
I
then. It was
mean,
definitely.
it's textbook of controlling the scene. Lizzie staying there, getting rid of Bridget, and even staying in the kitchen and the dining room and that area as long as she can watch things developing, um, to be there so long. Because I mean, naturally, maybe things are different, but you would almost, as a survivor in Lizzie's position, if you were innocent, you would not possibly not want to be there so close to everything.
Yeah.
Maybe you would. I don't know. That's a tricky call now that I'm thinking about it. Saying it.
Oh, okay. Randy's talking about Addie
Yeah.
Church. Well, we don't know how immediately was immediately. And we've actually timed, and it's on YouTube. We called it the Bridgette Run. From the time
Yeah.
Lizzie alerts Bridget. Bridget comes downstairs and starts to go into the sitting room, but Lizzie turns her to the side and out that side door. Now, Bridget was gone across the street for a while. At first, Mrs. Bowen doesn't hear her. And then she comes to the door, and there's some conversation between the two women. Dr. Bowen is out on calls, blah, blah. We all know the story. And then Bridget goes back to the side of the house, and Lizzie is in the back hall there in front of the sink room, which might be an important thought.
Mm-hmm.
And Addie Churchill at that point notices that Bridget has run back down the driveway and asked what's going on when she sees Lizzie through the kitchen window. And then Lizzie sends Bridget to get Alice Russell, but does not tell her exactly where the house is. And Bridget gets down to Borden Street, Borden and Third, and can't find the right house for Alice. Has to ask someone on the street. Bridget's gone quite a while. And while all this is going on, Addie Churchill is walking through her house, out the front, down the street, through the gate, and comes in on Lizzie, who is sitting on the second step of the back step. And Addie doesn't get to go very far before Lizzie says, I have to have a doctor. And then Mrs. Churchill, of course, sees across the street Tommy Bowes, who used to rent a room in her house. And she goes over. John Cunningham, who's coming up the street, is a stringer for the newspaper, overhears them, volunteers to go to Gorman's paint store that had a telephone to call the police.
So
So
what was the time span in all of that? Like less than 10 minutes?
we timed just Bridget's part.
Yeah.
We did it quickly. It might have actually taken more. And it was 8 minutes without much pausing. It was,
Okay. That's a
down the
short time.
stairs, talk to Lizzie, go across the street, talk to Mrs. Bowen, and it was 8 minutes. And then she ran down, of course, to where Alice Russell. I think that's where we're going to lose even more time. I would give that time frame probably closer to 10 minutes and possibly more.
Okay.
When she gets back, of course, Mrs. Churchill's on the scene. But um,
Churchill's one of my favorites too, because I was reading a conversation that it was something that I had thought about, and I just got a real kick out of it. About her positioning, like out, Churchill being at the window or out by the door, and it's like, well, is she always there? We all have that neighbor that's always looking out the same window. We were talking about Elizabeth Montgomery. I immediately go to, is it Gladys Kravitz was the character on Bewitched? Just stared.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and that jumped out to me, and and then that gets into a whole thing where, did Lizzie know she would be there, so she was safe if there was someone in the house, or on the offside, could Churchill, who actually was out, she had just come home, hadn't she, from shopping?
yes,
Addie Churchill?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so
yes.
yeah, it was a rare moment where she wasn't at her usual perch and couldn't see in the house. It was a theory I had, which is why Lizzie picked off Andrew when she did. So it's very interesting. Churchill is such a fun little variable that doesn't get the love she deserves.
She wasn't an old lady either. She was widowed,
No,
quite young.
that's right. Yeah.
Charles died. They hadn't been married all that long, and you have this picture of her as some aged old nosy crone. She was
Hmm.
about, and I think it was just chance because I believe their kitchen window overlooked um, the side door of the Borden house.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it looks like a very short distance. Like especially,
Very,
and there's one particular.
yeah.
There's one particular photo where it's very like ridiculously close.
Yeah,
It
well, the
was.
whole on either side it was close on houses on either side.
I
Yeah,
mean, Addie
definitely.
could have leaned out
Certainly,
the
certainly,
probably knocked the hat
but,
off.
but certainly closer than the barn, which again is if
Yeah.
Churchill was there, which she may have been semi-regularly, we don't know. Um, for Lizzie to have heard a groan from the barn and Churchill not to have. This is just another mini sort of rabbit hole that I found myself getting stuck down, and
Yeah.
yet it was in a very comedic thinking way.
A lot of rabbit holes. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a
Well,
good.
she had different stories. She heard a groan,
Mhm.
she like all different kinds of scenarios that she had
Yeah.
told different people
Hmm, we
of what
have
transpired.
some experiments. You know, Keith, that is a great point in talking about the myths. We've actually done experiments because Bridget was washing windows. Of course, the windows were closed.
Mhm.
And we put someone groaning at various volumes on the black sofa. We arranged the doors the way they were on the day of the murder.
Hmm.
And you absolutely cannot hear anybody groaning
Let
from
me
the
just
out.
say something about that too. So say for instance, Lizzie was out in the barn and she said, "Oh, I heard groaning and I came in to see." Right? If the murderer killed Andrew, like that first or second hit, say Andrew groaned, they had another 8 or 9 hatchet hits, so Lizzie would have ran into the murderer if that were true, right? They would have like ran right into each other because he had to finish the job
Of
if she heard
course.
the groan. So
And the front door is locked.
right.
John does test the back door when he comes home, and he says it was locked. So yeah, she would have run into the open arms of the killer on her
Yes,
way out
exactly.
the
So
door.
none of that's true. None of that.
A lot of it's common sense, and the best thing you can do is visit the house. Keith, you got
My
to come.
personal feeling is she never was in the barn at all.
I doubt it very much.
That's my
Yeah.
personal feeling. Because James Cole was asking, I was wondering from each of us who we thought committed the murders that morning. Da-da, da-da.
Lizzie,
Mm,
Lizzie Borden by herself.
I could make a good case for Lizzie. I would allow that there might have been an accomplice that Lizzie was working with. I know Randy will be upset because he's Lizzie's champion, and I'm glad Lizzie does have champions who believe she's innocent. I will say this much: it's real easy to make a case against her
Hmm.
or her and perhaps an accomplice. For it not to be Lizzie, boy, you have to do a lot of finagling. Uh,
Well, I'm
and
with Keith on this. I believe Lizzie 100% that did
yeah,
it.
in that direction.
Yeah.
I will leave an opening.
Just by I know it's all based on circumstantial evidence, but just by the powers of deduction, like
Yeah.
counting this out, counting that out, and what's left. So
Mhm.
Well, you'd have to disbelieve a lot of other factors and
for
people.
instance, another myth, we'll bring it up, that sort of helps us support our theory that Lizzie could have possibly done it. You can bring up slide number 5, Kenny. So there was this whole discussion on morphine when Lizzie testified if she was high on morphine or the effects of morphine, even that day, Thursday, when she was given bromocaffeine for a while and then later on. So, you know, I found this thing on morphine from the Mayo Clinic, who's a very reputable place. And Lizzie was given 1/8 of a gram of morphine. And then later, Dr. Bowen doubled that dose. But on average doses for modern pain, 10 to 20 milligrams are given every 4 hours.
Yes.
So, and So what Lizzie was given is a very low dose of morphine. So I think, I don't know, I tend to believe that her testimony in her inquest, what she changed her story around, not because she was high, but she was trying to get out of a predicament and trying to fix her wrongs. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it was said that Lizzie was not a good liar, and this is why they kept her off the stand. Robinson was smart because she would, and I know people who have a hard time. They tend to talk too much and they forget what they said to the other person, and they give a different version, forgetting what they've already said. I think she would have done damage had she talked more or been put on the stand during the trial, so they wisely kept her off the stand. I've had morphine a lot in my life as a painkiller, and I've read her inquest testimony, and including recently. Uh,
Well, morphine would be my drug of choice for a painkiller. I've had it too, and it's
it's good stuff, let me tell you.
yeah.
But when you read her inquest testimony, I find her very sharp, very
Mhm.
sharp. It all depends on your idea of cordiality. Now,
Right.
after having my doses of morphine, I could never have been that with it, you know. And
Right.
at one point, you know, she says, I don't know. There's so many of you talking to me, asking me questions. I don't even know what your name is.
Well, she
Yeah.
played on the Victorian woman too, you know, and oh, feel sorry for the woman.
And it's another thing that she was prescribed morphine, yes. She had prescription and had it. But did anybody actually watch her take it? It
Yeah,
wasn't an
didn't Bowen just leave it there? He or did he directly give it to her?
well, on the day of the murder, you know, the
Of
bromo
course.
caffeine. But you know, by the time we get to inquest day, and she was supposedly still prescribed morphine. Oh, I've got a medicine cabinet of stuff I was prescribed, including stuff for my surgery last week, but I didn't take it.
Yeah.
You can say, well, yeah, she was
Right.
prescribed this, but unless you're standing there watching her, you
Okay,
don't
I
know
yeah.
how much she took or if she was taking it at all. We know it was prescribed, but Bowen wasn't in the house watching
That's a
her.
good point. I mean,
You know,
yeah.
so yeah, I've been prescribed ibuprofen and all kinds of stuff, but I haven't taken any of it.
Mhm.
So there's that thought as well. Oh, talking about myths and redheaded women who have hot tempers. I haven't got my bobblehead in front of me, but when you see Lizzie portrayed in graphic novels, comic books, and Halloween costume, she's always got flaming red hair. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
you know, the ginger temper. I don't know. Keith,
That's
what
what
do
they're
you
going
think?
for. They come after us every time, and
They
I'm not
come in.
even that ginger.
Well, so when Ancestry.com made passport applications public, uh, my friend and I went looking for hers just in
Mhm.
case she had one, because you didn't have to have one in 1890. But she and the whole gang of girls, and we found all of them. Uh, it had very clearly, and Kenny has a copy. I don't know what slide that
I think
is.
it was a death certificate you gave me. Did you give me the passport though?
I gave you the passport application. It has her
Okay.
height at 5'3". Her eyes are gray, and her hair is light brown.
Okay.
So we finally put
I,
the kibosh on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
about a
think
month.
I think The Simpsons had it best. I mean, of all the depictions of
Simpsons.
Lizzie over the years, I think The Simpsons have actually nailed it closest.
I've never seen that
Uh,
one. There's a
I'll
Lizzie
send it
Borden.
your way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
There's a
Lizzie was in an episode. You know, of course,
oh, that's so
she was, I
cool.
believe, a jury of hell. Jury of people.
That's
Nixon was
great.
with her, and yeah. So I'll send.
And Alfred Hitchcock did a Lizzie Borden story too called the was it
young, younger
The
sister.
Younger Sister. Have you ever seen that one, Keith?
I actually haven't. No, no.
Oh my god, it's so good. It's really
Don't
good.
spoil it for you. You can
No.
get it
Okay.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Although I will say it's not. I don't think it's Hitch. No, it's not Hitchcock. But when I see what happened to Baby Jane, whatever happened to Baby Jane, there is
yeah.
some Lizzie Emma tones there for sure. I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, and there are some good things out there for entertainment value that I think are cleverly written, that I mean, there's some really fun stuff out there. Andrea said is asking, do you think she was acquitted because of an all-male jury? I want to answer this one. And couldn't imagine that a woman could commit such a gruesome murder. Absolutely, that had a lot to do with it because it's like the damsel in distress back then, or the knights. But the jury didn't take long to make that decision. What was it, like a half an hour? Not even.
Oh, I think they stayed out a little longer
Right,
just
they
to.
were just probably chit chatting, but I could imagine them just saying not guilty and then just hanging out for that extra time to make it look good, maybe. But
Yeah.
but even her defense attorney tried to portray her as this really feminine Miss Lizzie kind of woman in a patriarchal world.
Depending on
And
the newspaper, the papers, there's some were favorable. And when they show her drawing, she's beautifully dressed and very refined looking. But there were some newspapers, I think the Fall River Globe was more negative.
yeah.
And they show a very manly looking, heavy jowl, uh,
And I think the
scary looking
way,
woman.
right, they described her, but I think during the trial too, she picked opportunities to make herself like faint, like when,
Well,
like
yes.
to play that role very well, the feminine
Well,
role.
Robinson helped too.
Yeah.
He suggested to her that it might be nice to wear black, look sorrowful. She was very, very well dressed for
Hmm.
the and adopted a French twist hairdo, which was a change from her little Hebe knot style with the frizzled fringe that was very popular. And the gloves, the hat, and some of the women commented to newspaper. They, of course, wanted to try to go to the trial every day. It was like the hot ticket.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
all Violet, Daisies, all these young women wanted
That
the
supported her. Yes.
well, and they just wanted to see what she looked like.
Hmm.
And some of them were stunned to see a petite, well dressed, I mean, 5'3" was more average, but very refined, ladylike person with her fan, her minister, her little bouquet of flowers. She was an attractive woman. I always
Yeah,
thought.
when you did the animation, you can go to Shelley's website, Warps and
Wefts.
Wefts. I've always had trouble with that. And you did the animation of Lizzie, and that really shows she was a pretty young lady.
When she
I
slept,
mean, it
yeah,
helps, yeah,
it
to
does.
see, yeah,
Well, these faces are frozen, one frame. So
yeah.
when people judge Uncle John or Andrew or Abby, uh, they just have that one image. And this is what I love. They're creepy, yeah.
Well,
But
Shelley, it didn't help John, so
it did help
I'm
him too
just
much.
saying.
All shifty eyes.
You know,
Yeah.
I really, you know, we've gone through this. I've said this in many conversations with you. The similarities in this case between the OJ trial are numerous, and the jury was well picked, without a doubt. And I agree that these were fatherly men with daughters who might not have been Lizzie's age, but were on their way. But one element I think often gets overlooked with this trial, and I'm seeing it more and more as we go through the transcript, is I can't say much. I can't say much for Moody because he seems to be there. He's almost like the Christopher Darden.
Hmm.
He's punching, but he's young.
Mhm.
Um, Knowlton Knowlton never seemed all into me. And certainly was it Pillsbury. there's some they're holding back a little. Whereas you get over to your Robinson, your Jennings, and
Well,
your
yeah.
Adams.
And I
That's
think,
Cochran, Sheck, and Kardashian right there, or
mm,
Shapiro, and they're hitting hard. They're playing hard. And Jennings as an orator, and not Jennings or Robinson. Sometimes just having the ex-governor standing there fighting for you is enough, especially in this
yeah.
Victorian time where that was impressive and that
And
was
wasn't he a
striking.
charmer? He was. I think Robinson was like a charmer in the courtroom, and
Oh, yeah.
Knowlton,
Well,
yeah, like
Jennings was as well, and Adams was something of a dandy, if I recall. I mean,
yeah,
these were fancy. They talk about Jennings having like this magnetic personality. Wasn't he a great
yes,
dancer?
yeah,
Here with piercing
And
eyes.
Robinson too, dressed to the
Yeah,
nines.
hmm.
And
yeah.
But I
uh,
mean, have you ever been on jury duty? I have, and I was in this one case, and I thought about this. The like we went with uh the woman, we did the went with the defense, and this woman won the case, right? But it wasn't because I thought that she was totally innocent or in the right with what the whole case was about. It was because of that attorney.
Mhm.
Like that attorney had some charm, and the other one wasn't so not like good. and
mhm,
and that sort of swayed, like he was more believable. So I think
mhm.
sometimes it's not about the crime, it's about who's defending and prosecuting the case.
Absolutely.
OJ
Yeah.
OJ's off. OJ got off because of Johnny Cochran.
Oh
Casey Anthony
yeah.
got off because of Casey. What's oh shoot, Jose Baez.
Bias.
Um, it, it's so much of the time the attorney and the work they do for the jury. Not even the work behind the scenes, which is the bulk of it. It's just that extra
Yeah.
flash.
Yeah. And the other thing, Knowlton, and there's a letter that Knowlton sent even before the trial to it was about how he was saying he knows he can't win this case. He confessed to that right off the bat, that he couldn't win this case. He wrote a letter to it was one of the I think it was one of the lawyers, like Jennings or someone. It was in the Knowlton papers. The
Yes.
the letter. Yeah.
And
Okay, so I
wasn't
guess
he
I'll have to
was
bring that one up too, but I
he
will.
was he was he
It
was he was very much against death penalty for women as well,
Yeah.
wasn't he?
He didn't even want to
No,
do the case. He
No.
didn't.
no, and
Yeah.
Pillsbury backed off, and I mean,
Well, Pillsbury was smart. He knew it was a hot potato, and he had
yeah,
some political aspirations, so he handed that one off. As you say,
yeah,
I
they
don't
pulled
think
in a
Moulton was not all in on that one.
No.
And
no, they pulled in a ringer from out of town to do the hard work, and
and Moody was good, but yeah, he was still cutting his teeth. He was still young, but he was a
and
smooth.
he
You
I mean, if
and most
anybody
importantly,
reads
he was from out of town. That alone, you know,
behavioral.
at least
Yeah.
he's the
Yeah,
CFA as we say up
I just want to say to the listeners, if you read anything, read the closing statements in the trial transcripts of Knowlton and how he closed. I thought it was one of the best written pieces that I've
Mm.
ever read. I mean, like these lawyers were brilliant in the way they wrote. They presented the whole case on both sides. It's just that's what intrigued me about the whole trial. But his closing argument, I mean, he did the best he could do. It was really, really well done. But circumstantial evidence, yada
And
yada
I mean,
yada.
voicing like I've been voicing Moody for our thing, and it's just I'm reading through it, and Moody's hitting hard,
Hmm.
um, where
Yeah,
Knowlton's a
Shelly,
little
you like
more.
him?
He's my man.
Yeah,
I'm a
But
huge.
sometimes it's funny you mentioned how beautiful the language is. Sometimes I'm reading
yeah.
it and going,
It's amazing.
how do these 19th century farmers understand what's being said? And then I realize it's my own ignorance and how strong even passing language was, how
So
formal language was.
Oh my God. You know, we have really dumbed down over the centuries. We really have, because people wrote letters back then, even in the 16th century. I'm reading a book right now called Beatrice Cecil, and it takes place in Europe, in Italy, and it's about a 16-year-old girl put on trial for killing her father because he was a tyrant and raped her and stuff. And
Yeah.
she was put to death. She was, beheaded, a 16-year-old girl, because they accused her of being a witch and all this stuff. But it's so well written. I mean, and it's really hard to read because it's almost written like a tapestry and very poetic. Those writers in those days were amazing. So it doesn't surprise me that, you know, these attorneys like wrote like almost poetic, um, you
Oh,
know,
very eloquent, sure.
yes,
And they,
beautiful.
they go on to amazing careers after.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's just so many things. I'm wondering if we have some myths about Lizzie's time at Maplecroft to talk. One that always pops up, and I've been asked many times. She gets painted as a reclusive, sad, miserable, shunned, uh, and of course Lizzie had problems. She couldn't walk down the street without attracting attention. Um, a lady whose father, um, I guess, had been to Maplecroft when and Lizzie is an older lady, recounted a story how Lizzie went in to get a needle for her Victrola at a store in town in Fall River. And within seconds, everyone had come out on the mezzanine to watch her. I mean,
Mm,
uh, but she wasn't a recluse. She traveled a great deal, Washington D.C. to Boston, New
yeah.
York.
And she
She
knew a lot of wealthy women, like
well,
in high places.
she had her own circle of friends, um, and would travel where she was not recognized and enjoyed being
Hmm.
able to theater. Um, but quite often it's like she was shut away like a Rapunzel in a tower or something, and it never had any friends or didn't go anywhere, didn't see anybody. She got involved thanks to Helen Layton, with animal welfare projects.
And wasn't there Hal? Um, um,
Oh, Grace Hartley
Grace,
Howe.
yeah,
That's right.
Grace Hartley Howe
Uh,
was a friend of hers too.
yes, and very well connected, as
Hmm.
you married Louis B. Howe, who was FDR's right hand man.
And that's interesting, right, Shelley, that she like was friends with somebody who was well connected.
Oh yes, yeah. So that whole thing that she was shut away and shunned forever and ever
Hmm.
isn't quite right. She also took a lot of interest in some of her employees and
Right.
their issues. Hannah Nelson, of course, springs to mind right away. And the Terry family. I actually worked for Mr. Terry's grandson for a number of years, not knowing
Mm.
it was. And one day, David Terry came into my office and saw Len Ribello's book on my desk. And he picked it up and looked through, and there were pictures of, his family. And I was gobsmacked because I never realized that he was one of the Terrys. And he
Right.
told me a lot about, they absolutely loved her. They loved Lizzie. I never said a bad word around David about Lizzie Borden because she was very, very kind, of
Well, I
course, to
think she treated like her help and all, very
very,
well.
very
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and did a lot of things um, for them, help them.
Right. You know
As
what really struck me though? I've been in Maplecroft too. I got a personal tour from Sue. Thank you, Sue. And what I found fascinating was I just felt it was Lizzie's house, not Emma's, because Emma had a very small bedroom. Lizzie had her big bedroom, and she got another bedroom in the back of the house built for her summer bedroom or whatever you want to call it. So I when I went in there, I everybody says, "Oh, it's so beautiful. It's light and fluffy." I never got that impression. I got an impression of feeling sadness and something just floating through the air for me because I look at Emma's little bedroom and I think this is Lizzie's house still. There was just something about it that drew me to feel that way. And because of how luxurious it is, and the garage itself, I got the gas can, actually, the picture.
Mhm.
The garage was heated. They had that spinning thing for the car, so they needed me to back it in. It
Yeah,
just spun around.
yeah.
It's like ahead of its time. The house was really nice. But I always felt like, why does Emma have this little bedroom and Lizzie has these two gigantic rooms with these extra rooms attached to it? It's
Well,
like, who's running the house?
actually,
I don't
she
know.
didn't when Emma was living with her. The
Hmm.
addition put on till after the
Emma
back.
left?
Yeah, Emma left in 1905.
But was the addition put on after Emma left then?
After Emma left.
Oh, okay.
So we believe that the bedroom across the hall from Emma's room,
Yeah.
probably Lizzie's bedroom. And for many years, this is another myth. The feeling is, and Sue can certainly back me up on this one, as some others, including Michael
Oh,
Martin.
yes. Judy
Uh,
did too. Okay.
for years, they were saying that that big room on the second floor, front of the house, that has a window seat and a
Mm-hmm.
mantle,
Yeah.
uh, about when my fires burn low, old time friends, and that was her bedroom. I never bought it because there's French doors, for one thing, that you can see right into the whole room. And
Hmm.
Number one, Kenny slide.
yeah, it's looking more and more like that was her. Yes, that's the mantle. That was probably the library and a sitting room and not a bedroom at all. And then when she put the bedroom in the back of the house with the
I love that room though. It's a beautiful
yeah,
room.
private bath, it has a private bath.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that maybe had become a bedroom in later years. Michael Martins thinks it was a guest room. It does have a call bell in it. If you
Yeah.
look behind the door in the addition bedroom, it has a fireplace and it has a call bell and then a private bath as well.
Well, the
So
house I think has what, seven fireplaces? Six or seven?
all different woods.
Yeah.
But it is a mystery. No one has definitively proven, except probably that is Emma's room, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but this discussion we've talked to Mr. Doobie, we've talked to Mr. Silva, people who've lived in Maplecroft
Yeah.
before.
And
Um,
we'll probably never know, so it's okay. But
but I don't think that front bedroom with the the front room with the window seat for years was called her winter bedroom. I don't think it was. I think it was
okay.
a library sitting room. So
Well,
we'll
needless
hear.
to say, the house is very beautiful. It really is. I mean, I wouldn't mind living there. It's
We have a picture of her gas tank. I know I sent that because it was
yeah.
at a private gas
Number
tank
two, Kenny. There you go.
to go. And that is still there. That's absolutely true. And I hope they don't ever get rid of it because it's a
Now
real.
that's money when you have your own gas tank in your garage. But I think
Yeah,
she got that probably for privacy. Like she
well,
just,
maybe inconvenience and,
yeah,
chauffeur who could handle all these little needs of the automobile.
Yeah.
It was said Lizzie had one of the first, you know, private cars in the city. And she liked to keep up. It seemed to me that she liked to keep up with all the new conveniences
yeah.
and would, be among the first to have
Mm-hmm.
certain luxuries here and there when they became available to the
And
public.
after 32 years with Andrew, you could see why.
But another big myth
It's
is
like,
that
I know, yeah.
they didn't have running water on Second Street, and of course, that is not correct. They did
they did,
absolutely.
and they had an ice bucket too, right? Didn't they have an ice box?
Ice box,
Ice
correct.
box, right?
Where the guy would bring a chunk of ice with the tongs.
Yeah.
There was a privy in the cellar, and there was one out in the barn. Now, Abby and Andrew were used to outhouses. I can remember them from my childhood in the country. And my grandparents, with the bed, the chamber pot, the slop jar, the wash bowl and pitcher. I've lived all of that, and we're not that far from that. As a matter of fact, Lizzie and Emma used the cellar privy,
Hmm.
um, and there was city water. There was running water in the sink room where Andrew brushed his teeth the morning of the murders and where the girls did dishes. And there was running water at the barn as well, and also in the cellar. So now whether it
Yeah,
was hot
they
or cold, I'm not sure.
yeah, they did have a lot of things that, aren't really talked about. Like conveniences.
Well, and then there was a big
Yeah.
fuss, that Andrew was too cheap to have a telephone. Well, a lot of people in the city didn't. Mostly it was civic buildings and banks or commercial
Hmm.
businesses. And I mean, why have a telephone when most of your friends didn't have one? So this is why Mr. Cunningham had to run to the paint store to call the police the day of the murder. I'm surprised. I don't know if the Bowens had a phone or not, because I would think that if they had, Mrs. Bowen would have called the police when Bridget came over. So maybe they
Yeah.
didn't have a phone either. Uh, but that was not
Well,
unusual.
my father did. My father's family got their phone in 1963.
Yes.
Growing up, so
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
a
yeah. I
long time
remember
later.
party lines from the 50s. So that was not
Yeah.
unusual. But yes, they did have toilets and they did have running water. No big bathtub. And when you go to Maplecroft now, Lizzie's bathtub that came out of the addition is actually in the cellar because they
Mm.
modernized
Yeah.
that
They look like they
private.
have a modern claw bathtub in
Yeah.
there.
But Mr. Doobie did keep that tub. He showed it to me and said, "This is the one we took out of the addition. It's in the cellar." And I'm glad they've kept it. There's a lot of her time there. While we're talking about her time at Maplecroft, Kimber, you and I had what, a 2 hour discussion about the mantles in Maplecroft
Mm.
at home in my own
Yeah,
country.
if they were there, I mean, but didn't she actually purchase them already? She saw them that they all, well, we don't know, but
No, if Charles Allen put them in,
right.
and Lizzie liked the hymn at home in my own country, had it sung at her funeral by Vida Turner,
Hmm.
was that was on the mantle and
It was
not the.
already on the mantle. She didn't have it put on, right?
I would think those mantles were already installed by Charles
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than Lizzie liked that hymn, so she ripped the mantle off that was there and bought a new one and put it on.
Hmm.
I think they were already there.
Yeah.
And, and
So,
and I don't know if we said it in a conversation, but I mean that hymn was, it's like, it's like having Amazing Grace sung nowadays. It was a
yes.
popular hymn. Maybe not Amazing Grace level, but you know.
Well, that,
Yeah.
that brings me to this whole point. Why do you think people buy into these far fetched stories or they add more stuff on? What is it about people? You remember when we
You're
would,
asking a hard question. It's
yeah,
like,
well, you remember when we
Go
were
try
kids,
them.
yeah.
that game where somebody would start and they would whisper to the person next
The
to them.
telephone
And by the
telephone
time
game.
the story went around the room, the telephone game, that's right, the story we end up with is nothing like the original sentence that began because everybody has embellished and added on and had their own personal feelings about it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, so in the story of Lizzie Borden, the word peculiar shows up a lot, right? It was bugging me every time. Ah, this is peculiar. Even, her mother had peculiar ways. So I looked the word up, and what it says shows up. It says the definition is a term adopted by certain fundamentalist Christian sects signifying the refusal of such designated people to conform to any rule or conduct that is contrary to the letter or spirit of the Bible. In other
That's
words, it
interesting.
could be a non-conformant. Like
Yeah.
if you look at that definition, peculiarity stems from maybe being non-conforming. With
Well,
that definition, right?
well,
So,
Yeah.
or odd. I'd say a synonym would be odd. I had Victorian grandparents, and they would use, she was always peculiar. Like she
Yep.
didn't behave like most people. She was an odd person. And they said that about the Morse family,
mhm.
that the mother and Uncle John, a whole bunch of Morses, they were a peculiar lot. So they must have been, not your average everyday.
But but here's the thing, and this is where what I was really trying to piece together, because my book focuses on and women and society. And Sarah Morse, her friend was the woman. I get these. There's so many people involved. The woman that did the only interview with Lizzie in jail. What was her name, Shelley? But she was a friend of Sarah Morse's, and she was a woman suffrage.
Not Livermore.
Was it Livermore? Yeah,
Mary Livermore.
Mary Livermore.
Yeah.
Mary Livermore. If you look at her history and who she was a champion of women's rights. I mean, very much so. And she was a friend of Sarah Morris's, like very good friends. And I can't think that that would not touch awful on Sarah, wanting to raise her daughters as independent women. So if you look at the word peculiar, and I go back to this, nonconformant, not following the rules of what maybe society, you know where I'm getting at, Shelley. It's like, and this runs all through this case about women and women's rights, and because all of that was going on. You have to look at what was going on in the times, and like what was happening, and it was women fighting for rights because they had all those clubs they went to, and they talked amongst themselves. They were very private, like secrets were kept, because they were in that club, that group.
Another
So
thing, another thing that comes up is how many single women are in this story.
right, right,
Mhm.
Unnamed.
all of them.
You have a
It
lot of
was
widows,
like
that's true, but I mean, you got
it was a
Alice,
lot of them, a lot of them.
Layton, and Lizzie, and Emma,
Yeah,
and Helen Shove, some of the Borden clan
Oh,
that she went to Europe with
Alice
never married.
Russell.
yeah.
Yes,
They were
and
all.
it's
Yeah.
loaded.
And
It's
the
loaded.
Carries, the girls that went on the trip with them, they weren't getting married.
Well,
Mm-mm.
that was a little advanced, but they didn't have to. They didn't have to. They
Right.
had money, but it was a little bit more of a feminist thing, I
Oh
guess you could.
yeah.
That, well, no, we're not going to do what most girls are expected to do, is marry at 18, 19, pop out
Yeah.
9 children. Yeah, we don't have to do this. We're just going to stay single and have our
So,
own
and the
life. And it
question and the
was,
question is, you know, did Lizzie want to be alone and not marry and just have her money, and
well,
that's the
yeah,
question.
her principal, Mr. Benson, when he
Mm.
was in, he said that Lizzie never had the interest of a lot of young girls because she was there until she was
Mhm.
14 at grammar school, the one they just knocked down last August 5th. Uh, she wasn't always, pursuing a boyfriend or an admirer or a suitor, didn't talk about, oh, when I grow up, I'm home of my own and family. Didn't ever seem to actually interest her
Mhm.
uh, the way many were consumed with it from the
You
cradle.
know, um, I'm
And by
looking at the.
by
Oh, go
that
ahead.
standard, that by that standard, I mean that alone could make one come across as peculiar. You know, the
Hmm.
way
Yes.
we have so many different terms and so much more understanding of behaviors and health, mental health and whatnot.
Yeah,
That
yeah, exactly.
So, guys, I'm looking at the time, and it is 8:30. It's time to sign off, but I do want to do this real quick thing. Shelly, you wanted to give away. Did you want to give away a tea?
We were missing our tea lady, Rena.
Yeah.
Shout out to Rena. She's visiting her mom, who's feeling poorly in Texas, and she's not with us tonight. So we didn't have our usual tea spot. I have put a link on Kimbra's page and on my page just for our tea lovers here who tune in for Tea and Murder every other month. Harney and Company at harney.com
Hmm.
have produced two wonderful teas. Uh, let's see if I can get it in frame here. This one is Death on the
Death of
Nile,
the Nile.
and this one, which is a black tea with bergamot, uh,
Mm.
is Murder on the Orient Express. So, I had to have these, and I sampled them yesterday. Death on the Nile is my favorite. It's a lovely chamomile
Mm.
tea. It's an herbal tea with undernotes of cardamom, cinnamon, ginger, peppermint. It is heaven. It smells great. You will love this tea. You can get it on Amazon or you can also find it at harney.com. It's $11 for 20 tea sachets. The other tea, the death on the or the murder on the Orient Express, is a black tea. It's pretty strong. It'll put you in mind of Earl Grey. I love Harney teas. They come in these wonderful little silk bag sachet,
Hmm.
so you don't
That's cute.
get that nasty papery taste in your hot tea. Uh, but I'm hoping that they'll continue the line based on the Agatha Christie. I don't know. I think Kenneth Branagh is going to be making more. Now, I did watch his latest one, The Death on the Nile. I'm not a fan
Hmm.
like David Suchet's version, but
Yeah.
it's a clever tie-in with the teas. And I'm gonna save the tins. Just remodel my bathroom, and I'm doing a detective bathroom. So
Oh,
you have to
jeez.
with what you look, And I
So,
have a picture of David Suchet over the tub. So
did you want to do a giveaway with the tea, or
we can do
well,
sure.
I have something I want to give away.
Okay,
So, in my Lizzie Borden shop, I hand painted. It's just a little box, and it has the Borden backyard in it. With the pear trees and stuff. I didn't bring a picture, but I'm gonna give away that item from the Lizzie Borden shop, and I actually put in everybody's name that participated in the chat. So I'm gonna draw a name, and I will be happy to send it to you. All right.
Now I came with nothing, but everyone who's here tonight gets my undying respect and love.
Aw. Okay, so Millerick. Robin Millerick. I am going to be sending you the little Lizzie Borden box pear tree backyard hand painted by yours truly, me. So you will be getting that. And I'll reach out to you and get your address. But Keith, thank you so much once again for coming on. We totally appreciate you being
Thank you.
here with all your insight. And I do love what you just said, with the Lizzie Borden folks. And
It's
I
a
want
great
to,
community. Like I said it last time, and for anyone that wasn't here, I mean, Jack the Ripper, OJ. I have these other fascinations, Kennedy, and
mhm.
I really find this important community. Though there is the odd poking back and forth. I got my own knuckles wrapped there a couple weeks ago for saying axe instead of hatchet. When in reality, a hatchet is an axe, just a small axe. But it's a
Get it
very
right, Keith.
lovely, supportive, yeah, wonderful group of people. And
Yeah.
and we don't agree on everything, but it's lovely that we, for the most part, these discussions happen without people getting shamed or embarrassed or
Hmm.
Well,
anything like that. So it's
The only people
It's
who
rare.
know the truth of this whole matter are no longer with us, and we're never going to have
Oh,
to.
thank you, Judy, and thank you really for that. Thank you.
Yeah, we're never
Um,
going to the whole thing, but it's fun exploring possibilities. And Lizzie is so popular.
okay, Robin,
I
thank you.
so much, that they want her to be innocent, and maybe she was. We just don't know.
Hmm.
It's lifting the layers, and I still think you guys we ought to think about a trip to Springfield with a little midnight ninja action for the next.
I'll
Uh,
tell you what, and if we get caught, you can all run back to Canada with me. I can give
Oh,
you a
you can
safe
get us
haven
across
for a
the border.
while.
it's like,
I've been
Yeah, I have a
practicing.
friend who I
oh,
can sneak us across the border.
Canada, Canada.
I have a hairpin for picking the lock. I've been practicing, so we'll
All right,
probably.
so we're working on our next podcast, hopefully to get an astrologer in to do the charts of Lizzie and Emma.
Yes,
So we're hoping we can do that. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
it will indeed.
So we thank everyone for coming, and thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Keith. And we're going to sign off for the night. I know.
But we just scratched the surface. Time
I know.
flies.
All
There's
right,
so
but we'll have you back, Keith, for sure. You're a lot of fun. All right,
Anytime.
and okay, until next time, we'll see you guys. Have a good one.